May 20th, 2025. Well, yesterday there was a phone call, I guess it would be between President Trump and President Putin over the search for a settlement in the Ukraine-Russia war. And it sounds like that Trump came out of it somewhat optimistic, I thought, which is I kind of think that Vance was a little bit less optimistic in his comments. Um, but and Putin seemed very well matter of fact about it, and I didn't think very optimistic really. Um, so anyway, I just want to kind of get into this situation. Remember, we already had the meeting in Istanbul, or attempt to having a meeting, which I guess it was a couple of hour meeting, but basically it was a real non sequitur. I mean, you would have to say that it was a disjoint set, you know. As far as the area, a set of things that the Russians agreed to and the things that the Ukrainians viewed to, they didn't have an intersection to speak of, except I guess for a prisoner exchange of 1,000 captured people from each side that would be arranged sometime in the future. So, but basically, that's apparently that Trump believes that they will be able to that these talks will start. He says immediately, although I don't think it's going to be immediate. I mean, are they going to happen in the next day or two? I mean, I don't know. We'll see what the time frame on that is and exactly what happens. Um, and the background of this is this ongoing, lingering discussion of some grandiose set of sanctions that will be imposed if Russia doesn't comply with whatever it is that we want. Um, these are usually called secondary sanctions, which are largely to basically say that we'll put tremendous tariffs on any country trade with us that would buy oil from Russia, if in fact these are imposed. And so that's what that is. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit as we get into this discussion. But basically, what we really have, I think, is a situation where both sides simply are not on the same page. And I think each side has honestly believes a set of things that the other side doesn't even consider too much, or the so the U.S. side seems to be that Russia is fundamentally offensive in nature and wants to take back territories that used to be part of the Soviet Union, and they're planning on doing it by force, and that it's purely maybe almost a personal obsession of Putin's, similar to, let's say, in World War II, Hitler's desire for Lebensraum, or what they called it, where he would be wanting to take more territory just to have it. But okay, that seems to be the kind of attitude, and they also seem to present the idea that somehow that Russia does pose a threat to actually attack NATO at some point, that they will actually go to war with NATO. That okay. Now, the Russian side of it, for their position, is that it's NATO is the aggressor. That they, after all, when the Soviet Union, fell, that they agreed during that period, even before the Soviet Union completely fell, right, that they would, pull out of area. The Warsaw Pact would be ended. That the Berlin Wall was allowed to go down. That Germany was allowed to reunite, and so forth. And after that, they believed that they were promised that NATO wouldn't expand any further than Germany, but of course it did. It expanded all the way through most of the Warsaw Pact countries, and even into areas that Russia or Soviet Union controlled in the Baltic states. And so, from their point of view, there's no end to this. Add to the fact that the deployment of missile launchers in Poland and Romania, which NATO sees as defensive, and actually, I personally feel that they are defensive. Also, I think they're SM-3, I believe, standard missile interceptors, the same as it's on the naval vessels that are capable of intercepting a ballistic missile. But their viewpoint, I think, is well, you could also put offensive missiles in the same launchers, which you could. I don't believe we have, but okay, that's the situation. And furthermore, from their point of view, if Ukraine were to become part of NATO, they foresee that just like there's American troops in various other NATO countries and air bases and soon to be allegedly intermediate range missiles, which had been banned under the INF treaty, but we've since rescinded and voided. That we could actually end up deploying nuclear missiles into Ukraine hypothetically at some future date, which would put all their strategic assets into very prompt area to be attacked. Now that hasn't happened yet, but remember, a strong Ukraine in NATO would preclude them being able to do much about it other than literally going to a war that they wouldn't want to go to. So that's kind of, I think, the Russian position. And you can see how disjoint the two positions are. That, in fact, from the Russian perspective, um, the that if in fact the Minsk Accords had been carried out, which wouldn't have involved anything like the invasion of 2022, that this whole thing wouldn't have even needed to have happened. At any rate, so if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Or you can follow me on Rumble at the address in the description below. So that's I think that's something that needs to be considered. It's hard to know exactly where President Trump is on this whole thing. His basic attitude seems to be, A, it's not my war. I didn't get this thing going. B, it wouldn't have happened if I'd been president. Why is that? I don't know. Is it because the Russians were so afraid of him that they wouldn't have dared to do it? Or is it because he'd have handled the diplomacy as he led up to what led to the war in a way that would have prevented it from happening by making certain deals that wouldn't have, spun out of control? And so his main thing is a lot of people are getting killed, a lot of properties being damaged, it's all destructive, and I want it to end. So that's kind of Trump's position going into it, as I see it. And of course, that's a problem because Zelensky doesn't want it to end. They want Russia completely out of all the territory that they held prior to the revolution in 2014. Okay. And at this point in time, the Russian position seems to be that they want these four additional oblasts of Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, and that they're willing to settle for that if the Ukrainians would give them to them. And of course, they also want to retain Crimea, which even Zelensky rejects letting the Russians keep. So this is the situation we're into. So I don't think these negotiations have a whole lot of promise myself. Because I don't know. For one thing, you have Ukrainians that are not willing to make, as far as I can see, any concessions at all. And all they want is a ceasefire, probably so that they can stop the Russian offensive that's about to start. And then absorb a bunch of additional armaments if they can get them and recruit a much more troops. And so given that situation, and given that Russia is unwilling to give them that, it's kind of an impasse to see where things go. Furthermore, the U.S. seems to, between this super set of sanctions on the one hand against Russia, and the statement that we might just get tired of this and let it go and quit participating at all if you guys don't come up with something. I presume those statements are designed to pressure Ukraine because, I mean, Russia would say to that, really? Please do. So, remove your special forces, remove your trainers, quit sending weapons, and quit engaging in cyber warfare actions and intelligence sharing, and we'll be quite happy with that. So, as you can see, so I think that seems to be the state of play. We'll have to see, where they meet, even at the Vatican. That's interesting, but I don't know. I don't think. Well, at any rate, well, let's let that go. The other question I'm really kind of interested in pointing out is this idea of this massive secondary sanction would prevent the Russians from selling any oil at all. First of all, I mean, the weaker countries in the world probably would just accede to that, I guess. Um, and even India probably would, since they want to. Will China? I don't know. That's an interesting question. I mean, China uses up 47% of Russian oil, which is quite a bit. And here's the other thing: if we were to do this great sanction, obviously all those countries, if they do obey it, would have to go on the international oil market and start buying up about the same amount of oil, which would then there isn't that much extra oil that is not being used. So I don't know, maybe some of the Middle Eastern countries as a favor to Trump would increase production, but ultimately I don't think they can make up all of it, maybe. And so all of a sudden the price of oil would go sky high, and that might bring on a recession throughout the developed world. So it might be a self-defeating thing. It might hurt Russia. Second of all, would it actually stop Russia? Is it truly a kill switch on the Russian war machine? Would that really stop them? After all, I mean, look at the things that happened in countries like before. Look at North Korea. I mean, it's almost sanctioned into oblivion, and yet it's producing enough munitions to actually help fuel the Russian effort. So it might just make the Russian populace mad and make them more determined than ever, and not actually take away their capability to pursue the conflict to a successful outcome. And so that's certainly one possibility. Maybe it would bring them out. I mean, there seems to be the attitude that we just have one more sanction away from bringing down Russia. But do we? That's the question. I think it's something that maybe I guess we'll learn. And I don't even know how China will react. I mean, right now we have 30% sanctions on Chinese products, which probably, in spite of threats from Trump, are probably going to lead to major retailers in this country increasing prices. I can't believe that a company like Walmart can really afford to eat that much. I mean, I just don't think they can. We'll see. And so, I mean, they want to make money, not please a political figure. So, to be quite blunt. So, it looks to me like even that's a big burden on China. And if we add to it this secondary sanction, they might just not participate, which I guess then we go back to the trade embargo level we just negotiated away. And, well, the Walmart shelves and many other shelves start becoming more and more vacant, which then drives up prices as we look for other alternatives, and people get kind of annoyed. Because I don't think the mass public is very much into this conflict at all over there. In fact, sometimes my videos on this subject are not the most popular. So, at any rate, what I'm saying is I think that is a questionable situation. But anyway, that's kind of the way I see it. We're looking forward to these negotiations beginning, and let's see what kind of propositions are made. I would think an optimum Russian strategy would to make some concession out of their position. One of which I would suggest would be that they wouldn't insist on taking any territory on the west side of the Dnieper River. That would be a stalemate by demanding the entirety of Zaporizhia and Kherson Oblast, right? And so the question is then, what concession would Ukraine make? Well, most likely Ukraine will make no concession, and therefore that will anger Trump and put Trump more in the Russian sphere, less likely to impose higher sanctions on them. But will they do that? They seem to be so stiff-nosed that they seem like they won't do that or anything. So I don't. We'll see what happens. But at any rate, I'll be wrapping this up for now, and we'll of course be posting this as always on YouTube and Rumble. And the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. So all for now.